Hi everybody, welcome back to more explorations in free cut piecing. Today I'm going to start out with this a little review because I'm always talking about how bias is your friend in free cut piecing, and it really is, and there's a reason for that. When you get a woven piece of fabric, the first threads that are laid on a loom are the lengthwise or the warped threads, and then when the weaving takes place, the threads have to go over and under those warp threads, and that introduces a little more fibers into the mix. So you can always tell where the warp is because it's going to run parallel to your selvage. And if you test this, you can see there's very little stretch there. There's more stretch on the crosswise grain because of that extra thread that's in there. And then the most stretch is on the true bias, which is at a 45-degree angle. But as soon as you're not on the straight of grain, you're introducing that stretch that lets you get away with stuff in free cut piecing that is different than if you're on absolute straight grain where you want absolutely straight lines. And I found through experience over time that I really like, for binding, I like to cut on the crosswise grain, which is an economical way to use fabric. But I find that little bit of stretch, when I'm applying bias, I can pull a little bit on the bottom as I'm sewing to get it on nice and smoothly. That is harder when you're actually using the straight, the warp grain. Okay, so I'm going to try to insert a picture here of a block that I showed you earlier of a leaf. And because I made that quilt 7 years ago, I had trouble remembering how I did it. But I think the way I did it is I did stacks of half leaves. And in that stack, I included some pre-pieced fabric to give me the circular parts of the leaf and the diagonal things. And so I always want you to think about that when you have leftover blocks or from free cut piecing or leftover blocks from other projects. Think about including them in the stack because you add a bunch of complexity with stuff that you already have. And for this exercise today, I have pre-pieced some more complex things that I'm going to include in my stack to make some leaves with. And I don't know exactly how it's going to come out, but we'll find out. And my stack is all awry here. So if you recall, I remember telling you that it's always good to start out with all the pieces in your stack the same size. So it's just helpful, and if you've done some of this piecing, you see why, so that you know where to start and stop sewing on all your blocks. And I'm cutting these in a rectangle, but of course it doesn't have to be a rectangle, it can be whatever. And down here on this little bit. And I have six fabrics in my stack, 3 of the pieced ones and 3 of the solids. And I tend to work in 6s because, I don't know, it seems like the way I designed it works out well that way. So let's see, first I'm going to do my leaf shape. Get this part out of the way. So again, I think I'm going to keep my backgrounds the same here. That's pretty interesting on its own, but I can always cut it up again. So I'm going to piece this one into this one. So we always want to go in the reverse order. And you stitch with between your 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. This orange fabric has a lot of stretch in it, which makes it really easy. If you've ever heard me give my talk, I talk about how I started out doing this technique on silk, and not Dupioni silk, but other silks can be very stretchy. So it was real easy to do this on silk. We want to press toward our leafy shape. And then just a review here, because we have these yucky ears at the top and bottom, we want to trim those off. I think the reason I like to work in 6s is because it gives you more options. If you're going to restack and recut, you might avoid some odd repeats if you have more choices when you're sewing these back together. On the other hand, I rarely do more than 6 in a stack because it gets harder to cut when you have more than 6 fabrics. Plus there's times when those multiples of 2 and 3 also work to your advantage. Okay, so I would run to the ironing board and press this. So the next one I'm going to do with, let's see, do a solid. You notice I don't agonize too much over the colors, because if I'm going to recut these, they're going to be so mixed up anyway. That's interesting. Ooh, that's not such great contrast, so I'm going to choose a different. And one thing that you may have bumped into, sometimes, say I get down to the bottom of my stack and I really hate the last piece that I have to put on here. You can always use this piece as a pattern and put it on some different fabric and cut yourself a new piece to piece on here. So if ever anything really goes wrong You can always use your piece with a problem as a pattern for a new piece. Something I like about quilting is that if you get something you don't like, you can keep messing around with it. You can embroider on it, you can paint on it, you can cut it up again, you can do insertions, you can do astonishing quilting. So you can keep, even after your piece is all quilted, you can continue to alter it. Although it's better to do that before you finish the edges. So I have no idea how these pieces are going to go together, and I should run over and press these out, but I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. See if I can thumbnail press them down. You can get a preview of how these two might look. Yikes, that's pretty crazy. That I like better. I think it's because it's so much plainer that way. I don't know. Would you do this? I might wait till I piece more of the blocks and see if I can get a better combination. Because although this I think is all right, especially if I do something pretty in here, but that's what I said about this process is very serendipitous. And the other thing I can do too is if I really don't think good things are happening here, I can always put this on top of another solid color piece of fabric, which I don't think I have anything right at hand. But you see what I'm saying? I could stack this up on top of, like, say, a plain purple piece of fabric and recut this and exchange the halves and mess around with them in some way. Just a thought. So I'll try to piece this before the next class and show you what I come up with. And I promise next class I'm going to show how you start designing with all these units. I had a couple classes ago, I took all the pieces I had and put them up on the board, and it was kind of overwhelming. So before the next class, I'm going to start over again and judiciously put units up on my design wall and see if I can come up with a good design. So what we learned about here was, well, the very serendipitous of free cut piecing, but also to think about piecing fabric and then using that pieced fabric in your stack. And the worst that can happen is you get something that's not so beautiful like I have gotten here, but I'm going to try to work with these and come up with something prettier. Okay, so come back for the next time, and thank you for watching. Bye.